One of the experiences I trust every homebrewer shares is the feeling of awe that comes from witnessing the conversion of wort into beer through the fermentation process. Even after 15 years, I still get giddy when I see the first signs of airlock activity, a nice fluffy krausen developing on top of my beer. The worst is when this takes too long. You all know the anxiety that comes from checking on a batch a day after pitching and seeing no action. This is why we love Imperial Yeast, who pack 200 billion cells of the purest yeast into each pitch-right pouch, which assures quick starts, healthy fermentation, and predictably great results. I strongly urge all of our listeners to check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and let them know that you appreciate their support of the Brewlosophy podcast while you're at it. All right, on to the show. Brewlosophy officially launched back in February of 2014. Now, at the time, I'd built a couple identical brewing setups for experimentation. I began collecting data from friends, and I thought maybe a few other brewers out there with my nerdy bent might be interested in what I was finding. As it turns out, more than a few were interested, and Brewlosophy.com began to grow and surprisingly grow. It was very clear that I was going to have to start making some decisions on where to take this thing. Then, in early 2017, we announced that we'd be starting this thing that you're listening to now, the Brewlosophy podcast, and it was something many had been asking for, and we spent a lot of time talking about and planning. It's hard to believe that that was nearly 3 years ago at this point, and we're coming up on 6 years in total since starting the website. As pleased and honestly proud as I am with where Brewlosophy is today and where I see it heading in the future, this came not without its fair share of hate. In fact, to this day, there exists a contingent of people who seem to get off on letting us know, often publicly, everything that they think we're doing wrong. This is the Brewlosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and I'm joined by contributor Jake Houlihan for this Brews Views episode, where we're going to be unabashedly addressing some of the most common complaints thrown our way.
Yeah, this is a really exciting episode, I think, Marshall. I know we talk internally sometimes when some of these things come up, but, really publicly, we don't address it too much. And I think this will be kind of a good chance to give some of our thoughts on why we do things the way we do and, hopefully give some insight to people, into some of the goings-ons.
Yeah, behind the scenes stuff and what we're really thinking about some of the stuff that people throw out there. Now, there is, I think, an element of understanding that we all share when people critique what it is that we're doing or the way that we've done something, whatever it might be. So I don't want this to come across as just us being overly defensive, but we also get, or at least I know I do, get questions on the side from people who are saying, hey, it seems like these people are so-and-so or doing this thing. And so we thought it would be, I do think some people out there see the stuff or hear the stuff that gets thrown our way. I do think it's going to be fun, but a little bit anxiety provoking for me at least, to talk about this in more of a public way. We won't be naming names or anything like that. In fact, I appreciate the fact that people are so willing to share their opinions, but we are going to do our best to talk about this stuff in a way that's sort of fun and hopefully lighthearted. Now, just as a reminder, I know that there are some people out there who aren't much into adult language. I can't necessarily say that I relate with that, but this is a series where we do let loose a little bit and speak a tad more candidly than maybe than we do in some of our other shows. So, consider yourself warned. We might drop a couple F-bombs. I don't know. I'm not planning on it, but it might happen. We are, big boys and girls over here. Well, boys at least. All right, if you enjoy the show and you'd like to make sure it sticks around, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, where in return for a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with someone in the brewing world. Guests have included folks like John Palmer, Gordon Strong, Michael Tonsmeyer, Russian Rivers, Vinny Chilurzo, all sorts of other awesome people in the brewing world, and all past sessions are available to watch whenever you want on our private Facebook page. You can learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. And if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we would really appreciate it. Feedback is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who offer brewers gorgeous stainless gear such as the turnkey BH15 Pilot Brewing System, which has a hard plumb manifold to eliminate all hosing changes during the brewing process. Brewers Hardware has a ton of unique purpose-built products useful to both professionals and home brewers. Go see for yourself at brewershardware.com. And don't forget to mention Brewlosophy at checkout to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. Listener James Warren wrote in with a comment after listening to the episode on the impact age has on milled grain. He says, I'm the assistant brewer at the Workshop Brewing Company in Traverse City, Michigan. I noticed you guys mentioned it's normal for pros to mill straight into the mash. This is a common practice. It's what we do here, but I imagine it's just as common to mill into a grist case or to not even have a mill on premise. A grist case is basically a separate container to move milled grain into before adding it to the mash tun. It's very common to mill grains the night before brewing with these setups. Also, many breweries don't or can't have a grain mill on site and depend on their maltsters pre-milling their grain for them. Many breweries will do this process for adjuncts, even with a mill on site, so they don't need to change their mill gap.
Yeah, this was pretty crazy. I know right after that article published, and then again after you and Kate did that podcast, we did hear a bunch of feedback that some pro brewers are getting their grains pre-milled, and that was shocking to me. I'd almost never considered that really as a possibility. I mean, maybe for some nanos or something, but definitely eye-opening for me.
Yeah, this show, there are often times where a topic in my mind it might be perceived. I'm kind of presuming that people are going to perceive the topic as maybe being a little bit more boring than other ones. I'm telling you right now that the amount of feedback that we got on that episode was astronomical. I've been responding to this day still, multiple emails per day on this. Another thing that people were saying about, James mentioned that you can order pre-milled grains from the maltster. Somebody was talking about, a home brewer was saying that when they did that, they noticed that there was a huge decrease in their efficiency, and then they get to the bottom of the bag, and next thing you know, they've got this crazy increase in efficiency. And they were talking about how, the little bits of starch actually in the milled grain bag will fall out and kind of pile up at the bottom. So you've got a bunch of husks on the top and the stuff on the bottom. So a lot of stuff to consider. It made me wonder if the experience that I had, I believe I talked about it in the last episode, where I saw a pretty decent hit to my efficiency when I used some older milled grains. It wasn't just a function of settling out maybe, and I left some behind in the bag, something like that. But I really do appreciate your feedback. Most of the home brewers, the pro breweries that I've been around do use an auger and mill directly into the mash tun right before, as they're mashing in. But I'd be interested to know of some of the other ones. I'm with you, Jake. It's probably, in my mind, more likely nano breweries that are, either milling day before or ordering pre-milled grains. So again, thanks for the feedback, James. If I'm ever in Traverse City, Michigan, I'll be sure to stop by the Workshop Brewing Company. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or drop us a line on social media. While super hoppy IPA is the style most brewers seem to be focusing on these days, I remember a time maybe 10 or so years ago where Belgian styles were all the rage. Everyone I knew was making styles like blonde, double, and triple. It seems I rarely get the opportunity to try good homebrewed Belgians nowadays, which is why I was excited to receive a triple aged in a gin barrel from listeners Tyson Schroyer and Tim Kleber out of Bloomington, Illinois.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
Now it's looking like us, or at least me anyway.
So it's ugly as shit?
Yeah.
Go ahead, give me your review about things you don't know. Let's insult some people. Let's insult the hard work and fruit of effort of some people.
It's kind of barley wine-ish.
I love you, but we don't know anything.
Smell it.
No, don't tell me what to do.
Do it.
Yeah, it's barley wine.
It's pretty good, actually.
Okay, good, because I was worried. Now it's turning on you?
No. Kind of tastes a little like apple on the end.
Apple on the end? Okay. It's strong. It's barley wine. It's delicious.
It's very
I like
strong.
it.
It'd be hard to drink a lot of it. That's for sure.
It's good. I like it as what it is, right? Like if I come over and I'm like, hey man, can I get you a beer? I'd never be like, I'll take a barley wine.
Yeah, you don't ask for that.
But if served a barley wine, then this is a good one.
Yeah. It's probably not even a barley wine. But
It probably isn't. Whatever it is, it was made in the style of barley wine.
it's warming my face.
Disclaimer, it might not be one, but it's in the style of it. We're getting good at this, dude. We should be politicians. I didn't say it was a barley wine.
No,
That's not what I said.
I have emails saying you said that.
Here's a video of you saying that. No, that's not what I said. Yeah, I like this, dude. Oh, I like it a lot. It's growing on me as I drink more of it.
Yeah.
It's got a smooth finish, almost like a caramelly flavor.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah, I like that a lot. This is like light and easy, but I really do like it. And I changed my mind. Like if you had this beer, then I come over and you're like, what can I get you? And I'm like, do you have that barley wine beer? Like I would drink this. I would drink a lot of this. I give this 10 jerseys.
Wow. All right. I'm going with 6.
That's all right. You'll get there, bud.
You know, I'm not going to ding the guys too much for thinking this was a barley wine, as it did have some of those kind of aged high ABV characteristics, though it was well balanced by esters and a slight phenol thing that I expect in a good triple. The beer was fantastically bready, almost like when you open up a fresh, bag of white bread type of thing. And while the barrel character definitely came through to me as a kind of a vanilla oaky thing, I didn't get much of the juniper or botanicals that I get from gin. But either way, I mean, this was a fantastic beer.
Yeah, it's funny that we didn't get Tim to say juniper on that one, despite gin being in there. But it does sound like a pretty interesting beer. I've had a few gin infused or gin barrel aged beers, and I think it works really well, especially playing off some of those hops.
Yeah. I believe this is the third beer now over 110 reviews that the guys have done, something like that. The third one that was made with some form of gin in an attempt, or maybe inspired by, they sent it in because they wanted to see if they could dupe Tim. And, Tyson sent a note along with this bottle saying, first off, that he was curious if the guys would pick out the juniper, like we were mentioning. To me, I think I've said this before as well, what Tim detects as juniper is actually this blend of like hop bitterness with hop flavor, especially more of that myrcene kind of green hop flavor. I don't get juniper from any of the beers he says that in, but I definitely do get that kind of piney green hop bitterness thing. Again, I think he's just misinterpreting that and calling it juniper. Either way, Tyson said that this beer took a gold medal with a score of 44 points in a recent competition. So nice work to Tyson and Tim on making what I thought was actually a really, really nice and unique Belgian triple. And thanks for sharing a bottle of it with us. If you'd like to have your beer or any other fermented beverage reviewed by Jersey and Tim, you can email me, Marshall@brewlosophy.com, and we'll get you all set up. All right, time for a quick break. When we get back, we'll be addressing the haters. Chilling work can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Xchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brewlosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Xchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Xchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to Xchillerator.com today. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Want to brew quality craft beer at home? The Grainfather provides a brewing system with superior design, innovative features, and the latest technology, allowing you to brew professional quality craft beer at home. Mash, sparge, boil, and cool all in one unit, meaning there's less equipment to use, clean, and store. No need for burners or hot plates. Just plug it in and brew great beer. Then get the best out of your fermentation with the Grainfather conical fermenters and glycol chiller. Plus, enhance your brewing experience with the brand new free-to-use Grainfather community app. You can take your brewing tools and your recipes with you everywhere, use brewing calculators on the fly, manage your recipes, and monitor your brew session from anywhere. Use your mobile device to manage your Grainfather brew wirelessly, automate mash schedules, and multitask without removing any of the brewing hands-on fun. Grainfather products can all be found at www.grainfather.com. Plus, as a Brewlosophy podcast listener, get 10% off your order. Just use discount code Brewlosophy19 at checkout. That's BRULosophy19 to receive 10% off your order. So head to shop.grainfather.com now to get this great deal. When Brewlosophy first got started, it was just a simple, free blog where I'd publish experiment results at unpredictable times. People wanted more, and I enjoyed what I was doing, so I figured I'd step things up a bit by bringing on contributors, which was met with a little bit of friction, but nothing too crazy. It actually wasn't until I started doing things to help me pay for all of this stuff that I experienced real blowback. Ah, yes, the great evil of not working for free, right? Within a year of starting the website, I realized I was blowing through cash just to keep up with this thing. I convinced myself it was worth it because I was having fun, but the truth is it just wasn't sustainable. You can ask my wife, she'll tell you the truth, I promise you. We'd grown to the point of needing to find, a web host and all that comes with that, which given our traffic was not cheap. In 1 month, I spent more on hosting and site security than I'd spent on brewing ingredients for most of the year prior. And there was more to it than just that. Grains, hops, yeast, gear replacement, et cetera, et cetera. It all cost money that would be needed in order for us to continue to do what we were doing. The first thing I did was set up some affiliate accounts with trusted online homebrew shops and, of course, Amazon. Then soon after, I integrated some ads into the website, which combined did cover a decent chunk of our costs. But some people didn't care about that. We were immediately accused by a handful of folks out there of being, quote, shills. I had to Google that at first to even see what it meant, who were only out to make a buck. No matter how much I tried to explain it, it didn't matter. These people were and are seemingly so against the idea of incentivized work. So I just stopped trying to explain things. Jake, you've been around long enough to have experienced quite a bit of this hate.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know. This one is such a hard one for me because you go to any online website, many online blogs. I mean, just think about like anytime you Google a recipe, and click on, I don't know, like a popular website that comes up. When you're searching for a recipe, there are affiliate links, there are advertisements in pretty much every single spot you can find. And that's just a reality of how the internet works as we go away from things like television where, you're conditioned to have those commercial breaks every 10 minutes or so. I mean, just look at an NFL game. Every stoppage in play, pretty much, we're getting advertisements in the form of commercials. And the internet is evolving into a place where it's no different from that. People have to find ways to support, like you said, the hosting fees, just all the costs that go into this. It's not an insubstantial amount of money, and there has to be some way to cover that.
No, but there's also the element of profit, though, and I feel like we live in a time where a certain subsect of people view anything that is not a salaried career. But still generates revenue as being evil in some way, like it's going to in some way taint what it is that the person is doing. And then even more so, and I get this argument, I guess, on some level, we started off, or I should say in the very beginning, I started off doing this thing that was purely hobby based. And so people kind of look at that, and then the fact that we might be generating a little bit of money off of it now as kind of like, oh man, you sold out, that it's the sold out argument. And I grew up in a world listening to punk rock where, as soon as they signed with a major label, the cool thing to do was to, accuse them of selling out. But I can't say, and maybe I'm biased by the position that we're in today. I can't say that I view things that way anymore. People need, we are driven by incentive. We do things because it can come from many different places, but because we feel motivated to do things because we're getting something out of it. Now, when it comes to Brewlosophy, I could say till I'm blue in the face, I'm doing the main thing driving me doing this is because I love brewing. I love the community. I love experimenting. All of that stuff contributes to me wanting to do it. There's also an aspect of, it is incentivized. There's a little bit of money that comes in. We're not paying for all of our ingredients out of pocket anymore. So it's not hurting our families. That kind of motivates me as well. But that last part, for whatever reason, there's a people out there who just cannot tolerate that. And I don't know if it's driven by, I don't want to presume too much, maybe a deep-seated kind of envy, or if it is genuinely because they have some, socio-political view that it's like evil. It's just, and what do you do? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. And I really don't know. I mean, kind of back to your point about like the bands that, are on an indie label and maybe kind of underground, and then they do sign with a major record label and quote unquote sell out. I mean, I could see that. Like a lot of us who, grew up listening to that kind of music, we all probably played that kind of music, maybe had like a band, like some high school friends and stuff. And we felt this sort of connection to those indie artists. And then when they sell out, it's like, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to get to that point. Maybe it is like a deep-seated jealousy, like you said.
Well, I don't want to, again, the psychologist in me is budding and you kind of wants to poke his head out here, but I don't want to get too much into that. It's hard for me to see it as being anything else than I don't understand. We are still so plugged into the homebrewing community. And again, not to pat our own backs, but we are incredibly responsive when people email us or when, we try to integrate feedback into every episode and I respond to every email I get, or I try to at least. We had some issues with our feedback email recently, but I try to be as responsive as possible. You all have your own emails related or linked to Brewlosophy that you are responsive to. I don't know what else, how else to justify, that we're good. I'm not going to do this thing at a cost. I'm not going to blow money doing this thing as much as I might love it. It's just not sustainable. When we started the podcast, all of that hate that we originally got on the website, after about a year and a half, people just, I guess, just got used to it and we're okay with the fact that we're not, breaking the bank to keep the thing running. But when we were talking about the podcast, I knew from the start that we were going to have sponsors to keep it going. So I made sure to get, on board with businesses before we even dropped our first episode who I genuinely trusted. That's another thing that I feel that we're really cognizant of is not working with companies who maybe we've never experienced their product or what. All of the sponsors that we have on this show right here, every single one of them, I talk to the owners of those companies on a weekly basis. We are friends. We are working together to continue bringing this new content out to the world. And yet we still, if you go and you just scroll through, at least in iTunes or Apple Podcasts, our reviews, we might get a 5-star review from somebody but man, you could really have less ads. I don't know how else to support this. People will propose, we have a Patreon. Well, you should maybe do a Patreon for, how many people would actually pay $10 a month to listen to this show without ads? Come on. Nobody's going to do that because it's easy enough to skip through the ads is what you read. So, it's just the fact that we're not giving away free content and the fact that drives people crazy is something, again, it just I want to understand it. I'm not going to get defensive about it. I've just stopped responding to those people publicly because I don't think there's any good in me doing that. But it's pretty remarkable to me that people just expect us to invest all of the time that we do, which I'm going to get to in a minute, and then just give away that content, just give it away for free.
Yeah, totally. We all listen to podcasts. We listen to quite a few. And how often will it be like, I don't know, maybe a sports or a culture podcast, and then the advertisement pops up, Join Simply Safe or HelloFresh, whatever it is. And it's like,
hey, we're not being paid by them, Jake. You need to chill out, bro.
But the advertisement has nothing to do with the content of what you're consuming.
Yeah.
And for us, like you said, we work with these sponsors. We're friends with them. We hang out with them at these conferences and we trust their product. And we're all working together to kind of promote homebrewing and to kind of go to the point about putting the podcast behind a paywall, and maybe that's a way to circumvent advertising so people could, just consume us talking straight for 50 minutes without ads being broken up in that. We want to support the community. Like we want to have this available to consumers on a free basis. And if that takes listening to, I don't know what percent breakdown we have of advertisements in each episode, but that's something we have to suffer through for every podcast that we want to consume for free.
Yeah. There's, the other thing that I think of too is first off, that I agree with you that the way that we've got our advertising for the podcast, the structure set up. And in fact, the same goes for the website now. Yeah. We run some AdSense ads on there because we have to. That is not, people who don't know, I didn't know before we started the whole Brewlosophy thing and really as it started to grow, I did not know how expensive maintaining a website alone is. And then we add this podcast on top of that and server space and all of that stuff. There is an element of a reciprocal, give and take. And Imperial yeast. That's all I use. I love those guys. They're great people. Yakima Valley hops. The brew bag. I still recommend that to every new brewer who reaches out to me. It is the best bag that I've ever used. I'm not just saying that to say it. I'm not paid enough to lie about it. You know what I mean? And that's the other thing is we're not, it's not like I'm going out and buying a Rolls Royce. We're not getting rich off of this thing at all. We are basically covering our costs and then and keeping things safe over here so that we don't get in trouble. I've got taxes that I have to deal with. This is a business that people don't want to accept as a business. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that it's just this hobby. It can't be both things. You can't have your cake and eat it too in this world. We publish over at Brewlosophy.com. Again, I don't want to get defensive. We publish 2 articles every single week, nearly all of which are focused on beers that one of us brewed. So, after making said beers with ingredients that we largely purchase ourselves, we then spend hours collecting data, which in addition to the time means that we are not the ones drinking the beer that we're making. We're giving away, I don't know, Jake, maybe half of each keg that we make.
Oh yeah, it can be a substantial amount. And really the biggest part about the data collection is the time away from our families. I mean, yeah, we'd probably go, like, I personally go to the homebrew clubs and get a lot of data that way. I know you go to House of Pendragon, or a lot of times it's some people in your neighborhood, but like, that's time. I mean, I don't know. Having 2 kids now, having a family, it's like every single time we have to go get data. And I don't want to say that, we don't like doing this and don't enjoy doing it, but it is a commitment. It becomes something more than just, this is a hobby. I mean, this is something that has actual responsibility. We have accountability to each other.
Yeah.
It's something that we do for fun, but also there is a component there that, being compensated for it doesn't feel like we're taking advantage of anyone.
Yeah. And if there's somebody out there who feels like because we are incentivized to do this with money, all right, and that's not the biggest incentive, trust me, that we are in some way taking advantage of them. I mean, and here's the thing: we've got almost 900 patrons. We have people who see where we're coming from. That we're not addressing the masses. I don't think. I really do think that this point is primarily a small, segment of people who probably don't like what we're doing anyways, and so this is their other avenue in for dinging us. But once that data is collected, just to kind of continue on, we spend more time analyzing it, writing the articles, editing the articles, and then, like I said, we do our best to respond to all of the comments that come in. You go look at any experiment article, and you go down into the comments section, and usually for every comment somebody left, there's a comment from a contributor who's responding to that. That all requires time and focus, and for us to do that. In addition to 2 articles every single month or every single week, we produce 1 podcast episode every single week. So you clump that together, that's 3 things a week coming from what I think a lot of people view as just some hobbyist. I don't mean to brag or anything, but I do think that the production quality of this show is pretty damn good. And that's because we care enough. We cared enough in the beginning, at least, to invest in the right kind of gear, which is anyone who knows the audio world is very well aware is not cheap. Then on top of that, there are hosting fees and, of course, all of the time it takes into putting this thing together. My wife is out with my son at the orthodontist as I'm recording this right now. I've got family over who I had to peel away from for an hour and a half so that I can sit and record a show. That's not something that somebody's just going to go and do week after week after week just because they enjoy doing it. It's not sustainable. On top of all of the recording time, on the coordinating between the people who are going to do an episode, all of the planning that takes. Each episode requires, I would say 2 to 3 hours to plan, Jake, get all your notes together.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And, not only that, like kind of the back and forth that we have to go through beforehand just to settle on a topic, just to figure out what the talking points are. That's before even investing the time to kind of write an outline and in terms of what the points you want to make are going to be, and things of that nature. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, we just kind of do that throughout the day and stuff, but that's time where you're not focusing on something else or
yeah.
No, it takes thought. It takes thought for sure.
And then you've got, I'm not overly investing in editing at this point. I think we've kind of, got things down to a point to where I don't have to do that. But after we're done recording this episode, I'll probably spend another 2 hours making sure that it's edited well together and that everything sounds good. And then, from there, I've got to render it down and upload it and then write a blurb. All of these things require time. And I don't see, again, any fault in us, at the very least, having some sort of compensation for all of that time. And if there's any other proof that someone needs that we're not getting rich off of this thing, which I think that'd be great if we could. I mean, I'm not going to lie about that, but we're not. We all still have our day jobs, which means I'm waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and heading to my day job and then coming home and doing all of the planning and everything that needs to be done in between family time. I'll stay up late when everyone else in the house is asleep, and I'll wake up early when they're still asleep just to get this stuff out of the way. Yeah, in part because I enjoy doing it. But again, if there was I'd be lying if I said that if all of the money that it costs to run this thing was just coming out of my pocket, my family's pocket, there'd be no way that this would be around. And I think there are people out there who like the fact that it's around, regardless of the fact that there might be some ads or there might, so I guess that's just my take on the haters, of the advertising side of things.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, even if I wasn't involved in Brulosophy, I still do consume things like podcasts all the time. And if I have to get through some ads or whatever just to have that content out there available to me, that's something I want. That's something I enjoy. And like I said, I mean, I would still consume this even if I wasn't a Brulosophy contributor. I think it's worthwhile. I think it's thoughtful, and I think we address good points.
Yeah. Final point on this one, and we'll move on to our next topic. But, when I'm listening to other podcasts and, it may not be that I'm going to go and buy a Casper bed, I'm probably not going to do that, or HelloFresh, whatever. But I sure am glad, one, that those people have the support of those advertisers so that I can still consume their free content. And two, I really, really hope that those hosts are well enough compensated that they're not struggling to get by, because I want them to be happy too. And I get that there's going to be an element, again, a contingent of people who just don't understand that. I do believe that there might be a fair degree of naivete involved in not understanding what all it takes to run something like Brulosophy. And that's okay. I'm not going to be upset with them. But at the same time, I'm not going to waste my energy after this bit, at least, trying to convince them to see it our way. All right. The next thing, another thing that people seem to complain about is coincidentally one of the things I think that we're most known for. And that's the fact that we use the triangle test.
Yeah. We've talked about this internally. We've heard feedback on this from plenty of people. And ultimately, we think the triangle test is the best, most efficient method for what we're trying to do, which is provide homebrewers with, thoughtful content that does, maybe question some views that we have that might be unfounded, might be founded, but in a way that allows us to be able to collect this data and present it. Are there best practices for triangle tests, such as like randomizing AAB or ABA, however that all shakes out? Yes, there are. And do we do those? No. Again, it kind of goes to the efficiency of doing a triangle test versus, being in a lab setting, being funded by grant research money, and having this be something that is a daytime job.
The thing is this, I think there's, and I understand it, but I think people out there who listen to us or who read the stuff that we're pumping out, some of them they might think that maybe we just kind of haphazardly stumbled upon this thing and decided to do it. And, oh, look, they don't actually know what they're doing. There were no fewer than 3 PhD level statisticians who I consulted with over the years, early on, really, who have helped us to shape the exact approach that we take, balancing, at least hopefully, simplicity with valuable, interesting, and arguably valid information. I get that there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction when you read a result that doesn't jibe with what you think or with what other people have been talking about over the years. I get that. We all experience that as well. I know you do, Jake, because we've talked about it a ton. But for what we are looking at, which let me just remind people, it's beer. It is beer. We are not trying to cure cancer here. I feel like if we continue doing what we are doing by serving 3 beers to one person, 2 of them are identical, 1 is different, and saying, can you distinguish a difference between these? At the very least, we can pull away and say, hey, check this out. It's kind of interesting, right? That when we did this thing on, say, mash temperature and compared beers that were, mashed 10 or 15 degrees apart, and were completely different ABVs, people couldn't taste a difference. Isn't that interesting? We're going to get to another complaint that we get often that is kind of a spin-off of this one. But I think some people out there get really up in arms about the fact that we're not saying more that, well, this is just for fun. And it's sort of not. I mean, I've adapted because of some of the results that we do. And the triangle test is helpful for that. It's the industry standard. Yes. Could we have more participants? Would it be better if we got 100 people to do it? Yes, it absolutely would. If we got 100 participants per experiment. What would also be really cool is if the people who complain about it a lot, go ahead and give it a shot for once. Go and brew 2 batches side by side. Go find a minimum of 20 participants. Administer it in colored cups that you have to pay for. You go give that a shot and then come back to us and let us know what you think. Is it really as invalid as you're claiming it is right now? That's kind of my...
And do it in good faith too. I think that is one of kind of the biggest mindset changes. I think when we start doing this, and when we get into doing our triangle tests and actually testing a variable, it's having that open mind that, maybe I can't taste a difference in this. Does that mean I'm a bad taster because I can't taste a 2% ABV difference in beers mashed 15 degrees apart?
Right.
I don't think so. Maybe it just means that, the human palate is not that sensitive to things that, we thought or we've been told for years, really do matter and do make a difference. And I don't know. There are so many, factual differences between the beers that we do test when we run these experiments. But ultimately, I think as Ray always says, the human palate is really the tester that we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
We want to see if people largely can or can't tell a difference. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to get into the whole super taster versus normal taster versus non-taster thing. But, maybe if we did do every single experiment with super tasters, maybe some of the experiments would come back as significant that haven't. I don't know. Maybe, but does it really matter?
Well, you lose applicability when you do that. And I think one of the things that maybe people get confused about sometimes is that we're not... people will misinterpret what we say. Again, we'll address that one in a minute. But we're not out there to say, hey, look, this doesn't matter. Maybe we've mistakenly made comments that flippantly, like that in the past, but we are very, very aware and cautious not to say such things these days. But I think people we've had addressed feedback on this show before where people are saying, I wish you would speak more conclusively about this stuff. We want to feel comfortable in changing these methods that we've been using forever to simplify our brew day. The thing is, I don't care if you do, if you change your methods or not. I don't care if somebody who's an adult who, might read one of our results and go try something for themselves. It doesn't, I'm not out here trying to say, here's how to make better beer. We're just having fun with what we do for a hobby, brewing. And, it is another thing that I think people get confused about is we are fully, completely 100% open that our aim is sensory analysis. We are looking at the sensory, the subjective, that side of things and on a general scale. So we want, is the average craft beer drinker / home brewer going to be able to tell a difference because of something like mash temp or fermentation temperature or whatever? We know that we are not out there speaking to objective differences. And I think there's some confusion sometimes that when we provide a result that is based in sensory, right, the subjective, people think that we are commenting on the objective differences. I think at most what we'll usually say, if we don't get lab work done, what we'll usually say is there probably are objective differences between these, but those don't seem to lead to a very, very strong sensory difference, a subjective difference between the beers.
Right, totally. And oftentimes there are those subjective differences or objective differences in the beer. I mean, we can measure them, we can see them, but I don't know. I mean, we do this for fun. There is a certain element, I think, probably when you started, specifically of like, oh, hey, isn't it funny that, you've said this for years and can't tell a difference between it actually, but we've kind of gone through all those variables of the things that people have been told forever, and kind of figured out, I guess, what the data shows actually does make a perceptible difference or not.
Yeah.
At this point.
For some things, at least, yeah. I don't disagree. There are some other, I guess, kind of sub complaints that we get when it comes to the triangle test. One of them that I just want to clear up for people out there who might be a little bit confused is that you'll hear something like, oh, but almost half of the people got it right, and so how could it be? How could it be that that's not significant? Well, triangle means 3, so you would expect 66.6% to be, or 33.3% if it was random guessing, right? So about a third of the people to pick each cup if it were completely random, if they were the same. So if half of the people get it right, you're not really speaking to the triangle test. People just kind of, I think, forget that aspect of it. So there's that. The other one that I think, deserves a little bit of attention is this idea that we do serve beers to tasters who have no idea what the variable is. And that is completely the industry standard. Blindness is very, very important, particularly in things like medicine testing and whatnot. There's an argument to be made, though, that if we were to let our tasters know, hey, this was what the experiment was based on, you have no clue which one is in what glass in front of you, but it's proposed that, for example, a short boil is going to produce more of a corny, a DMS characteristic to it. I feel like there's an argument to be made for that being able to help people focus in on the one that is different. And to be honest, just as a layperson who, I still basically read our results with interest. If I saw that a whole group of 20 people was aware of what the variable was and the experiment was significant, I'm okay with that. That's actually really interesting to me. So that's something that we are talking about internally. I don't know what your thoughts are on the blindness aspect of things, Jake.
Yeah, I like it for certain topics just because, we do serve these a lot of times to people we know and people that maybe have held strong beliefs about like, oh, I always taste this thing or whatever. And it is kind of funny sometimes if they get it wrong and it's like, oh yeah, well, you've always said you taste this, but you got this wrong. I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of like a one-off type thing, but we all read quite a bit of research, I think, when we're preparing articles and things like that. And when these researchers are getting data, like half the time it's like cited and people have been, trained up on the variable to know what to look for. Right. And then the other half of the time it's blind. Like, yeah. I personally I think it would be interesting if for every single article we could have 2 sets of data. Like this is what the results were blind. This is what the results were when people were told what the variable is and told what to look for. And I think I've done 2 of those where I explain the variable and explain what they should be looking for. And I don't think we've not published that data yet, so I won't talk about which variables they are.
Well, I will tell you this though, because I've done it a couple of times as well, and I forget what the variables were. But I know for a fact that the 2 that you did, and I believe it was Matt who maybe did 1 or 2 like this. I've done a few like that. None of them have the results. Just the reason we haven't published it because it's really not that interesting. The results haven't differed from the blind tasting results either. So that again. Good argument to be had for if you can focus in on what the differences, are. Maybe it would change some of the results. That doesn't seem to pan out yet. Anyways, I think that's interesting. We do have to get to a quick break. Speaking of advertisers, cool our jets for a bit after talking about that stuff. But we are going to be back in just a minute with a couple more responses to some critiques that we receive. BrewersFriend.com offers everything needed by brewers of all levels, from the novice to the seasoned professional, including their feature-packed recipe builder that allows brewers to track their progress and record all data to improve brewing consistency. Brewers Friend also offers a slew of new features to cater to the professional brewing industry, such as groups which allow multiple users to access one brewery account, tank tracking which tracks the current status of any vessel, as well as inventory projections and custom alerts. Head over to BrewersFriend.com now and use code PODCAST at checkout to save 10% on your membership. Again, that's code PODCAST at BrewersFriend.com. When dumping wort-soaked grain in leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, did you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD. That's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. A few years ago, I was privately contacted by someone who told me a long and fascinating story about how he'd been traveling through the woods in some state in America and stumbled upon a group of guys who were sharing beer with each other. Apparently, it was a local homebrew club meeting. He ended up having a chat with these people, and as is often the case, the topic turned to brewing processes and methods. According to the guy who was emailing me, I'm not going to name drop here, these brewers mentioned that they ditched certain traditional methods because of Brewlosophy experiment results. Wonderful, right? This person went on to use this experience to accuse me, no joke, of, quote, ruining homebrewing. That's right, us curious nerds testing things out and sharing our results with all of you is responsible for ruining the hobby.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. We all have these things that we think are like deep-seated beliefs or whatever, things that matter. And when somebody comes along and questions them, and this is in all walks of life. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on religion or something like that. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like people don't want to be challenged, but yet they kind of want us to like tell them what does matter. And I don't know, it's just a big kind of jumbled mess of whether or not the result confirms or questions something. It just ends up being a mess in terms of how people interpret it. And we don't recommend anything. I mean, we get this data. It either is significant at our p-value or it isn't. And we just offer some insights on that. We don't recommend somebody say, ferment a lager at 80. I mean, I know you recommend people ferment them at 66.
But the truth is I don't recommend that. I do it. And if you are considering the fact that I'm doing something as a recommendation, then I think you're wrong. But there are people out there who make it a point very often, quite vocally, yet anonymously, of course, to accuse us of, suggesting that people change their ways specifically because of an experiment result or because we wrote about a short and shoddy brew day or something like that. The truth is, I honestly cannot remember the last time I overtly recommended anyone do anything. I mean, yeah, every once in a while, somebody will shoot me an email. Hey man, I saw that you fermented with such and such a yeast, at this temperature and produced a good Pilsner. Do you think I can get away with that? Now my response, is usually, well, I did, and I liked the outcome, but try it for yourself. So, again, it's just beer, man. And I feel like there's gotta be something else underneath the presumption that we are, if it can't can't just be naivete, right? You can't be that stupid to think that just because we're sharing information that we're actually like promoting, people change their ways. I guess I don't feel terrible if I hear from somebody, and I'll tell you, I hear from a lot of people who try something a little bit different, maybe simplify their brew day and are pleased with the results. Who cares? Why would anybody care about that? And I guess that's kind of my, where I start to get a little bit, I don't want to say judgmental, but it just seems like, there's an element of gatekeeping, I think, that goes along in this hobby. We brought that up in a previous episode. And it really kind of, shines through on this, when it comes to the way that people who don't like us or who don't like what we're doing kind of think that our intent is, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that causes people to get upset about this one. I mean, just look at like any homebrew forum that we have. I'll just take the homebrew Reddit, for example. Everybody can add a flair. There's novice brewer flair, intermediate brewer flair, and expert brewer flair. Well, an expert person, is sitting there on the Q&A, is responding to people's questions in like the most dogmatic way possible. And, I don't fault them for that. Like, we've all been told how certain things work and generally have come to accept that. And then Brewlosophy comes along and says, our data showed that this thing you've been recommending for 10 years and really believe matters, doesn't make a perceptible difference in our tasting panel. I can see how people would maybe take that as an affront and maybe as a question of their authority. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I know what matters. And we come along and data doesn't show that it does matter.
And we make it a point. I feel like we do, at least make it a point to say often that, yeah, we used this style of beer. We collected data from 25 people at a homebrew club meeting. This could be a fluke, it totally could be, but at least we went out and we tried it out. And in this scenario, it didn't seem to make much of a difference. Now, if you want to go out and be the one who's making all of the recommendations, but then come back and point the pistol at us for not even making a recommendation, but just questioning the recommendation that you made, man, that's on you. I mean, brewers are big boys and girls. These are people who are adults, who are crafting a thing on their own, who know how to make decisions on their own about a product that isn't, life or death. I mean, I don't understand what it is about some people. I get kind of on my soapbox here about some people's like, you want to protect these, lowly little homebrewers who just don't know as much as you. Let them do what they want to do, man. I mean, it's just beer and brewing. Let them make the changes that they're interested in making. Let them try it out for themselves. Who hasn't made a batch of beer that they didn't really like and dumped it down the drain? That's okay. Nobody's ruining this hobby for you unless what you dig the most out of it is telling people how to do things.
Oh yeah, for sure. And for me, really the hobby is about having fun. And if I can brew more, I'm having more fun. And doing certain things that we've tested and haven't really shown a perceptible difference cause me to brew more because my brew days are shorter and I can have more fun, then that's what I want. I don't want to hear I don't want to hear somebody come and say, oh, that Helles was probably terrible because you had a calculated 60 IBUs or whatever it is, and that doesn't match up with what the BJCP says it should be. Like, I don't care. I just want to have fun and make a beer that I enjoy drinking.
Yeah. That's exactly the point, right? And who are you to question if I'm having a good time over here doing things by myself, making a beer that I enjoy drinking? I mean, just because you think that your method of producing a classic fill in the blank style is better, fine, then go do it. Nobody's asking you not to do it. Stop asking us not to do it. And by us, I mean, homebrewers out there who are willing to question tradition and whatnot. Now, I think there's people like to have fun with it a little bit, and I think we're all okay with that. But here's the funny thing. For as much shit as we get from these people who are apparently very invested in, traditional methods and making sure everyone else agrees with them, you want to know how many people I've heard from who, after adapting their brewing process because of us, because of the results that we've put out, made a bad batch of beer? Not a single person. That doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. But those aren't the people who are reaching out to me. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I hear from people multiple times a week saying, hey, I can't believe it. I did what amounts to basically a short and shoddy brew day. I reduced my mash length. I reduced my boil length. I fermented a Pilsner at 66 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 19 degrees C. and the beer came out fantastic. I won an award. I've done all this. It's not like I get super motivated hearing that, but I'll tell you, it certainly does make me question the intent of the people who are constantly on our tail about the way that we do things here.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And kind of on a personal anecdote for this, I have a neighbor who was super into brewing before we moved to the neighborhood, like brewed all the time and always did kind of those traditional things that you had been told to do. And we kind of met each other through our wives and started talking brewing and stuff. And he checked out the website and he's like, dude, the way you guys brew looks so easy. So he, gave it a shot, started doing the things like the no sparge and, fermenting without this precise control and stuff like that. And you know what? He hadn't brewed in like 5 years. And he's probably kicked out like 10 batches of beer in the last year. So he's having more fun and he's making beer because he was inspired by, some of the methods and stuff that we're not recommending. We're just putting it out there as, this is stuff we've done. It doesn't seem to make a difference. And he's enjoying it and making great beer. And I've had it and it is great. But I see that as a win.
Yeah, this makes me think of I guess is a sort of an analogy here, but I work with this person, my real job, right? When we're actually doing the things that support my family and whatnot. But they have this tendency, we'll say, that if they tend to make. Same profession as me, psychologist, but they tend to make the job appear much more difficult than some of us experience it as being, right? So we have our weekly staff meetings. And at one point, I think I made the comment, man, I feel like, and they're kind of newer. I've been there for, over a decade, and this person's been there for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I think I made the comment one day, something along the lines of, if it seems like you're making this a little bit more difficult than it actually is, this particular thing that we're supposed to do. And, I said, if you just maybe think about it a little bit differently, it doesn't have to be so tough on you. And the response, opposite of what I expected, was, frustration, and I was being mean to this person and whatnot. And it really kind of set the idea in my head that there are people out there who I really feel value engaging in something that they believe to be very hard. It's something that people, it tickles something in them. Like, I'm the special one who has the ability to do this very difficult thing. I don't share that. And in homebrewing, I see that all the time. I mean, there are people who almost don't want everyone else to be a home brewer because they like this thing being shrouded in mystery and being able to talk to people who don't brew about how this crazy thing that they do and how much, how painstaking it was to produce this perfect Helles or whatever it was. I'm quite opposite. In fact, I tell people all the time, you could do this yourself. It's not that difficult. It just takes a little bit of time and actually wanting to do it and the ability to drink 5 gallons of beer. But it's not that difficult. And I feel like that is one of the things that people kind of influences the haters out there, if you will, to view what we're doing as being different than what our actual intent is.
No, I totally agree. And I worked in auditing for 8 years, and I had a partner that I worked under who said, all the time, this isn't brain surgery. We're not saving the world here. It's just auditing. And that's the same thing with homebrewing. I mean, We're making a batch of beer for ourselves and our friends to consume. Maybe we're going to enter it into a competition, get some feedback, whatever. But, ultimately it's 5 gallons, 10 gallons. That's less than 100 beers. Like, what are we doing thinking this is the most complex thing in the world?
Yeah, man. And I mean, I'm going to, we'll move on to the next complaint here in a minute. But if you're one of those people out there, if you're listening to this show, I'm doubt you're one of those people, but if you're so caught up in what other people are doing that has no impact on you, then that's your issue. And I don't know how else to put it, but you need to maybe refocus on what really matters, which is doing things that you enjoy and not worrying about what other people are up to, in their own hobbies and whatnot. And you are mistaken. We are not advocating for anything. If anything, I think what we are advocating for is to get out there and do some more experimentation on your own. Try new things. Have fun with this. Don't be afraid to question the dogma, or don't be afraid, to go against the traditional grain, and make sure you have fun. At the same time, if you don't want to do that, fine, so be it. Don't do it. That's fine. We're not asking you to. I can't tell you how many times I'm perusing perusing some homebrewing Facebook group or forum, and I see somebody make an actual legit recommendation, or they'll even go as far to say something like, well, if you do this, then this will happen, which completely goes against one of our findings. You know what I say? Nothing. I just let them have it. Who cares? And maybe that's the thing is I feel like the very people who make those comments and who make those strong recommendations are the ones who throw the most shade our way for not even doing that, but just for sharing something that causes, questions their recommendation in the end.
Totally. I mean, maybe what they enjoy in life is not actually homebrewing. It's appearing an expert in the topic. and we're infringing on that enjoyment right now.
Yeah. And it's funny. And I've been told this. In fact, I just got an email from someone yesterday who, we get feedback from people just saying, hey, thank you, for doing what you're doing and whatnot. And this person said something along the lines of, I love how you guys speak authoritatively about what it is that you're doing without coming off as, these highfalutin experts who are going to teach everybody, how to do things better. And that is very intentional. That is something that we intend, is not to come across that way. So it is kind of funny when it gets misinterpreted, I guess. In the end, our entire goal is just to simply share the findings of our experimentation with people who might be interested. For those who aren't, that's perfectly okay as well. We're not making recommendations. We're just having a good time and hoping that, other people enjoy reading about and listening to the stuff that we're up to. So,
and hoping that we ourselves can personally learn something more about brewing,
absolutely,
versus what we've always been told.
Absolutely. And I can speak, truthfully that we absolutely have. I'm in a different spot mentally today and process wise today because of what we've done, the experimentation that we've done. Again, that doesn't mean I'm recommending other people start fermenting their lagers at 66 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't care if you do or you don't. I also don't care what the people out there who absolutely hate the fact I do that think. I don't care. I'm doing it not for them. I'm doing it for me. And that's it's brewing. I can be arrogant about it if I want to. All right. Final complaint. And this one is kind of on a lighter note. I figured we'd finish things off a little bit lighter by addressing a complaint that we see relatively often, perhaps more than any other, in fact. And it's not that big of a deal, but it's the complaint that per experiment, you're not brewing the right style of beer. Such and such a style is covering up any impact of the variable. Jake, how often do we see this one?
I feel like this one happens, every single time. So I did sodium metabisulfite versus not in a, I think it was a Helles or a Pilsner, whatever. The beer I like to drink the most. And 4 or 5 comments saying this should have been an IPA. IPAs are known to oxidize faster. Well, you know what? The result was significant. Participants could tell a difference between a Helles with SMB added versus not. And, hey, doing it in an IPA would be great for a future article, which Cade did recently, but it was a useful article. Like, we were able to see a difference in it. We get this complaint so much, and to me, it's the worst.
It's a tough one to have to respond to. And I think that I've kind of gotten to the point where I just don't respond to this one anymore. And it's not out of malice or I've said it all a million times. And I think, one of Ray has a great point that we'll make here, but the way I look at it is, dude, we got to pick something. You got to pick a style. And I guarantee you, if you didn't brew or if I didn't brew a blonde ale or a pale ale or an IPA and I went with a stout or I went with a porter, that there'd be equal number of people saying, why the hell did you choose that one, dude? That was a dumb decision to go with that style. You should have gone with something like a blonde ale or a pale, and it's no matter what, you can't please them all. And you got to settle on something. And I do think that we make a very conscious effort to pick styles that we think are going to emphasize any impact of the variable that it is that we're testing. Now, there are certain variables that are pretty stylistically, based. So, for example, cold side oxidation, I think most of those, though you did an experiment, I believe, on a Pilsner with that, but most of them have been done on IPA or New England IPA. We try to keep that stuff in mind, but you got to keep, I think people need to remember that our goal isn't just to do one and done. It's not just do this one experiment on this single variable and come to some conclusion that we, recommend to everybody. It really is here's one example using this style of beer. We're going to get to it again, and we might change the variable up a little bit. We might change that style of beer up a little bit, and then we're going to see how it plays out in that scenario. That's the only good way for us to get closer and closer to an actual truth, for us to get to a real conclusion, is replication, is trying it over and over again. And which is why we tell people all the time, don't take this single result as fact. If you want to use it to influence your own experimentation, by all means, that's great, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a fact.
Absolutely. I will say that when you look at actual published research, studies that are done in various brewing journals and stuff, typically they are using like a pale malt grist, so something like a Pilsner or a Helles or something like that. And I feel like Matt and myself might be kind of the biggest advocates for doing a pale ale, or not a pale ale, but like a pale yellow beer when it comes to stuff. And, it just so happens that we both love drinking those beers. So, it's not like pulling teeth to have those on tap. But I think to your point, we have to try these variables with a multitude of styles. Like mash temperature, maybe it doesn't matter in like a big, thick Russian Imperial Stout, but, maybe we have to try it on like a light American lager, and maybe it would have some sort of impact on body or something like that.
Yeah.
We can't do that the first article. We have to get back to it and do stuff like that. And we try. I mean, we're just a couple guys, though.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the we've got this. This is a shameless plug here for the Brew Club. One of the coolest things that we've set up with the members of the Brew Club is the ability for them to do maybe less controlled experiments. And people can accuse us of what they want. We're nuts about when we do our experimentation. We've got 2 identical brewing setups. Not many people do that. And we are very, very careful not to introduce extraneous variables, nothing like that. The Brew Club, not so much. These are your more garage scientists who are out doing things. Maybe they don't have identical fermentation vessels, or they don't have identical kettles, but they're still interested in experimenting. And that data is still valuable. Yeah. Maybe there are other things that could explain differences, but when you're not finding a difference and that confirms something that we've done or that somebody else has already done, that's valuable. That you're adding more grist to the proverbial meal, and I think that's really cool. So just again, shameless plug. If you are interested in having experimentation that you're doing, whether you're collecting data with a triangle test or not, go join the Brew Club, thebrewclub.com, and let them know what you're up to. You may get one of your experiment results published over at brewlosophy.com. We love doing that. We've made friends with a lot of the members of the Brew Club. We're pretty involved with them as well. So, but that is the point, right? Replication is the only way that we're going to inch closer and closer to a potential truth. And so, yes, there is an argument to be made that certain styles may not work perfectly well for certain variables, but how do we know that without testing it out? The argument, the one that gets me the most is when somebody uses an IPA for some variable, and it might even be a hop centered variable. And then the argument is, yeah, but the hop character just covered up any changes. Well, a lot of people are making IPA these days. And so if they can get away with making IPA and not doing such and such or whatever, and it doesn't have an impact on the beer, I feel like, again, that's valuable data.
I think it is too. I'm definitely guilty of seeing a result where the IPA was the style of choice for the specific variable, and thinking to myself like, oh yeah, of course, any hop flavors would have covered that up. But we've had plenty of experiments that have come back as showing significance or showing a difference that were brewed with IPAs. I think one of my first ones was a water chemistry experiment.
Oh yeah.
And going into it, I kind of thought like, the hops would probably cover up any difference in that, and they didn't. It was so obvious.
Yeah. Well, and again, there are going to be variables that are, I think, or styles that are better suited to certain variables and whatnot. We're not ignoring that, reality, and we do discuss every experiment before any of us brew and the style that's going into it. Sometimes we're told by the crew, don't brew that beer, and that's the beer we want to have on tap. But so we change things up to fit the variable that's being tested. Now, one of the things that Ray used to say, he's not contributing as much anymore these days, but one of his things was, we're homebrewers too, who want to have beer on tap that we enjoy drinking. That is who we are doing these experiments for, not for the people who are only making pale lager, which is mostly, what I make these days, I guess, but, not everybody is brewing that all the time. And so how applicable are results when every beer is made using some pale blonde ale or pale lager? Sure, maybe there's a result there. Maybe that's a significant result, that there isn't a noticeable impact. But what if there isn't in the beers that people are making more often than not? I mean, I think it's a decent argument. I do tend to sway more towards, like you and Matt, let's keep it really simple, because I think it's interesting to look if there aren't much flavor characteristics that could cover up the impact of a variable. But still, I get the argument.
Yeah, I totally get the argument. Of all the criticisms we get, I think often this is the one that, it makes the most sense on just like a pure face value level. But just do understand, like Marshall said, we put significant thought into this. I mean, every variable gets discussed so much. It can get annoying sometimes how much we discuss it in the back and forth. And, luckily we have our no butt hurt rule. so people don't get too upset, when we're going back and forth like that. But, we do put a lot of thought into these. And if the style doesn't seem right for the variable, and you think it's an interesting variable, go out and brew it yourself with the style you think it should be brewed in to potentially showcase differences. Nobody's stopping anyone from doing that.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And, if you are a brewer out there who looks at one of our results, I think, it's kind of what you're hitting on, Jake. You look at our result and we maybe did a Helles or a German Pilsner for a variable that you're wondering, well, how would that impact a, an IPA or a big old American stout? Give it a shot. We'll eventually get to it, I imagine, but we can't do all of that all the time. Like you said, Jake, we're 6 guys now who are keeping up with over 8 typically, articles every month and 4 podcast episodes. It's a lot of work. So give it a shot yourself. And again, the Brew Club is willing to work with you to design these experiments, and we can work to get them published on the site as well, so we can share them with a whole bunch of other people. So those are some of the more common complaints that we get. I think we hit on 4 of the most common. In fact, 4 of the ones that I feel like we've had to respond to the most often. I'm not sure. I can't think of anything else that maybe we left out, Jake.
I mean, there's probably plenty of other ones, but these are definitely the ones that, show up on like 80% of articles or whatever.
Well, outside of like personality, you can hate my personality all day long. That's fine with me as well.
Rad.
Well, that is all the time that we have for this episode. Hopefully it was at least worth the listen. I don't know about you, Jake, but I felt that it was kind of cathartic,
Oh yeah, definitely. People leave these comments, they leave them anonymously on websites, and there's times that we've all responded to them and things like that, but actually being able to discuss it in a way where we can get more than a two-line response to somebody that is anonymous and, that has no skin in this game really, whereas we all do it, it feels good sometimes to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And, just again, to reiterate, it wasn't my point. It wasn't our point in this episode today to necessarily defend what it is we're doing, though I know that it kind of came across that way a little bit, but really just to provide an explanation for why we make some of the decisions we do. One of the things that I love to see, again, this is kind of that Schadenfreude thing, when somebody is out there just throwing mad shade at us or whatever, is when somebody else comes along, somebody who maybe appreciates what we're up to and says, the comment is, well, that's great and all that you've got this complaint, but what have you contributed to homebrewing? What have you done? Because they're actually doing something. And whether you like it or not, you can't argue that they're not contributing to this hobby. And I will say, again, that feels good to see somebody else taking our back like that. But I do feel like what our entire goal is to contribute to this thing that we love, whether we're getting paid for it, whether we're brewing the wrong styles, all of these things. for me at least, the joy that I get from knowing that I'm a part of this rad hobby, that I get to have fun with such an awesome community, that really is the key. And so we appreciate all of you guys listening. I know we say this a lot. We appreciate all of the support we get from you guys. And if you have any complaints that you'd like to, shoot our way, I promise we'll respond if it's not completely scathing. Jake, that is all the time we really do have for this show. Do you have any final words for our listeners?
No, man, well said there.
All right, man. Don't forget to head over to Brulosophy.com to read about all of the experimental stuff we're up to. The Brulosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to Brulosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit Patreon.com/Brulosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brulosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no.